When people are talking about a song and they mention something like, yeah, the song's in A flat and then it goes to D flat in the bridge, or the song's in E minor and then it goes to G major later on, what the heck is it that they're talking about? What they're talking about is what key the song is in, or what sections of the song are in a certain key. A key in music is the set of notes that a song is based off of, either a major or minor scale in most cases. More importantly, however, is that a key tells us which note is the quote home base. In other words, what note does the whole scale revolve around? The musical term for this note, which would be the first note in the scale, is the quote tonic note. So before we can really understand the subject, we have to understand what the key to keys is. So let's start off with major keys. I think that all of us have heard what I'm about to sing to you right now, probably very badly, but here it goes. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. What I just sang is called solfege syllables, and it's a representation of the major scale. We can assign each one of the syllables in the scale a number 1 through 7. We call these numbers scale degrees, and they're also representations of the notes in the major scale. There's 7 different notes in the major scale, and then they keep repeating themselves over and over in octaves. So it's great knowing the syllables and the numbers, but how do we get to those numbers? What is the actual distance in between each one of those notes in terms of all the 12 notes that we have available to us in music? It can actually be boiled down to a very simple formula. The formula is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. If you start on any note, it doesn't matter what note it is, and you take all the notes that are exactly that distance from the original note, you'll end up with a major scale. So I'll lay out this pattern of whole steps and half steps on the 5th string of the guitar. Remember, this is the major scale. This is actually a C major scale. So if keys are named by whatever note is the tonic note of the scale, how do we indicate what note is a tonic note? The word for this is called tonicize. We can tonicize a certain note. We tonicize a note using the leading tone of the scale, which is the note that comes right before do. With the solfege syllables, this would be the syllable T. It's also the 7th scale degree. So I'm going to play the scale one more time and tell me if you notice a difference. If you notice there, I didn't play the last note of the scale, which would be do again. I left you hanging on the 7th scale degree. This note is the note that creates tension that wants to pull us back to do. One of the reasons that it creates this tension is because it's only a half step underneath do, which is the smallest possible interval we can have in music. This now leads us to talk about chords. For each one of the scale degrees in the scale 1 through 7, we can actually create a chord from that. Starting from each note in the scale, we can actually stack 2 other notes on top of that one in third intervals. A third interval is the distance between, let's say, the 1st and the 3rd scale degree, or the 2nd and the 4th scale degree. In other words, we're skipping over a note. If we add 2 third intervals over the first note in the scale, we get the scale degrees 1, 3, and 5. We can do this with the rest of the scale as follows. The subject of all these chords in the scale is a whole nother video in itself, but I just want to talk about 2 of them. The 1 chord and the 5 chord. When we build a chord off of the 5th note in the scale, we get the 5 chord. The 5 chord is what contains the leading tone in the scale, or the note T. When we use the 5 chord in our chord progressions, that's what tells us where 1 is. Listen to the following chord progression and you'll hear how the 5 chord wants to resolve to the 1 chord. The reason it wants to resolve to the 1 chord once again is because it has that leading tone in it that goes like this. Also, one thing to remember is that the 5 chord in a major key is also a major chord. So in a major key, the 5 chord tells us what note do is, but what about minor keys? The way that we find a minor key is that we need to take a major key and then find that key's corresponding relative minor key. We can find this key by taking the 6th scale degree of our major scale and treating it as do. The 6th chord in a major key is a minor chord. Now that we're treating the 6th note in the scale as do, we get the following syllables: do, re, mi, fa, sol, le, te, and do. I'm gonna lay these notes out on the guitar for you as well. This is called the natural minor scale. The distance between each of the notes in this scale is whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. This gives us the scale degrees of 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, and 1. So there's only one little problem now, is that we don't have T in the scale anymore. It's been replaced by te. The way that composers a long time ago fixed this problem is they invented something called a harmonic minor scale. What they did is they just took the natural minor scale and they artificially added in a raised 7th scale degree, making it sound like this. Without that raised 7th scale degree, the 5 chord would normally be a minor chord in the natural minor scale. But with our harmonic minor scale, we make the 5 chord major, which allows us to tonicize a minor chord. The same progression I played before in major would sound like this in a minor key. So now that we have a basic understanding of what keys are and how to construct them, how do we identify what key a song is in when we look at one? We identify keys using key signatures with sheet music. You'll find a key signature right at the beginning of the piece, and it'll either be a group of sharps or flats, or it could be no sharps or flats at all. For the sake of simplicity, we'll stick to the one that has no sharps or flats, which is the key of C, or A minor. That's exactly the problem though. It could be C or A minor, so how do we tell which one it is? The way that you can tell if the song's in A minor as opposed to C major is that you'll start seeing a lot of G sharp accidentals along the way in the melody. Or you would see the 5 chord somewhere from the minor key. Whereas if the song was in C, you probably wouldn't see very many G sharps in it. So why do we even call them keys in music? I did a lot of research on this subject, and it's kind of hard to pinpoint when and why people started calling them keys. One tidbit of information I found out is that the instrument, the clavichord, which was actually invented way back in the 14th century, basically means chord key. The name of that instrument is based off the Latin word clavis, which means key. Now my theory is it's actually sort of like an actual key for a door. The major and minor scales are simply formulas of whole steps and half steps starting off of any note. If you follow that formula exactly, you get the key to that key, whatever that's supposed to mean. Alright guys, I hope that you learned something. I hope that if you are having trouble with this subject, that now you have a better understanding on it. Understanding keys and harmony is one of the most essential parts of being a complete musician. Alright guys, if you enjoyed the video, please drop a thumbs up down below. Consider subscribing. I got new great content coming out every week for you guys. I'll definitely be doing more videos on these types of subjects in the future. Until next time, everybody, listen, learn, and jam.